Impression the game you get out with what you put into it. It's like a walk of life. If you're good enough, go out and get it, no more about it.
But not so much control in the centre of the field from Kilkenny as Richie Bennett sends it high and over the bar.
Your mother sends you down to the shop for a pound's worth of goods and she gives you 50 pence. You can't get the pound's worth of goods, can you?
Just about kept in. Oh, well done, Shawnee Buckley. To do that to Tommaso Shea, he deserves to score from here. One of the highlights of the Sunday game.
Limerick went out there from the word go today. No more about it. They made all the running, that was it. Put the ball over the bar and the back of it, and that's it. No ifs, no buts.
Is there much time left? We have a couple of injuries. Here comes Kieran Carey. Carey leading the charge of the right brigade. 45 metres out. He's a chance to score. He's put it hard. He's put it over.
There's no sympathy in this game for anybody.
Matt, welcome to Treaty Talk. Obviously, our usual host now, as it stands, Mr. Neville, is out of action this week. But we'll see if we can, the original crew back together, Matt, if we can't play some of the old favourite hits yet again. Matt, it's been a busy week. Plenty of stuff going on. 20s, minor hurling. I suppose a bit of a review back on last week's action as well that saw the Camogie and ladies football all in action. We will also look back at some of the other senior hurling and football matches over the weekend. Limerick, of course, sitting, I won't say safely in the semi-final, but at least watching the others knock lumps out of each other, which is good entertainment. And there has been some cracking games over the last few weekends. But Matt, I suppose we'll start with the hurling and the minors during the week came up short just against Cork. And I think we spoke off air about the underage kind of groups. And Cork seemed to have, decided a few years back when things weren't producing at senior level. They went back to the drawing board. They're now far more competitive in hearty competitions. Their underage structures, a big county, big playing numbers. They seem to be definitely setting the foundations for a revival down Leeside.
Yeah, Jack. Raf. That is absolutely.
I'll take that as a super compliment, Matt. Go on,
Mr. Neville. Yeah. No, there isn't any doubt at all about it, Raf. There is a complete change down Leeside, and they seem to be drifting, particularly at underage level there for a number of years and not producing the players, and it eventually reflects at senior level, but they seem very much to be getting their house in order for the last couple of years now, and certainly I was hugely impressed with the two Cork teams that Limerick played during the week. The minor team who lost to Cork by 10 points, and particularly I was very impressed with the Cork under 20 side last night because. And I know we'll be talking about it in more detail in a few minutes, but I thought it was. I thought really in the second half, Limerick really put it up to them. Now, and Cork withstood it. And when the pressure really came on, I suppose in recent years, it has been the hallmark of Cork, particularly at underage levels. When the pressure really came on late in the game, they have sort of imploded and have been overtaken. It did not happen last night, although it came very, very close to it. But if we reflect back to the minor game, which Cork won by 124 to 114, first of all, we have to note, the performance of Jack Leahy, the full forward. He got a goal and 14 points against Limerick. And that comes on top of he getting 3 goals and 9 points against Clare. So here we have a young man who has scored 4 goals and 23 points in 2 Munster Championship games against what would be regarded as hurling counties. It's Clare and Limerick. It's phenomenal. But the Cork, I thought on the night were full value for their win. But we have to qualify it by saying, Raf, that Limerick's preparation for both games has been anything but ideal. Because the real spanner on the works here was, of course, Limerick being involved in the All-Ireland the 2020 All-Ireland minor semi-final right up to a couple of weeks ago, because you had a situation where Dermot Mullins was the Limerick minor manager for 2020. He'd moved up to the 20s for 2021, and you had Kevin O'Hagan coming in. Now, Kevin O'Hagan was trying to prepare a squad, but he was trying to prepare a squad for a Munster Championship game in which he didn't have access or the benefit of the key players that were underage from last year because of their ongoing preparations for the All-Ireland semi-final. And if you take Dermot Mullins in a similar situation, he was trying to prepare two teams, the 2020 minor team and the 2021 under-20 team. And he did make the point about one or two of the minor players, that he had only seen them in the under-20 squad for a fortnight. That was before the Clare game. So it was, no, I'm not offering that as an excuse. But what I'm saying is that it was a very difficult juggling act to do. Now, Cork minors had a clear run with the under-21s, with the minors. They didn't have a clear run either with the under-20s because they were involved in the All-Ireland 2020 All-Ireland final up to about a fortnight ago. And Pat Ryan was confronted with something similar, but as Dermot Mullins, in that he had to sort of prepare two teams at the one time kind of thing, and with an overlap, and the overlap was 7 players. There were 7 players that started for Cork in the under-20 that played against Dublin in the All-Ireland final. So it was difficult. Now, on the face of it, it would look that it wasn't a good week for Limerick. But I think that Limerick came up against exceptional Cork teams this week, an exceptional minor team that I would expect. I would be very, very surprised if Cork don't win the All-Ireland Minor Hurling Championship.
Yeah, and I think we need to kind of stress as well that the key importance in a lot of these grades, Matt, is being competitive. It's not necessarily about winning them, but it's about being competitive. And I think, in those categories, Limerick have certainly ticked the boxes. I wouldn't be pressing any panic buttons or any alarm buttons at the moment. I think, Limerick teams are still right up there. Cork seem to have the edge and underage, but we know it's always it's also very hard to translate that underage into senior skill and progress and results at the top level. So again, I don't think it's anything to be alarmed about. I'd be quite happy with the performances of both teams. And we should stress as well that I know the 20s gave Cork a really good rattle and came up just 2 points short in the end. And I know Colin O'Neill had 2 frees that he would have hoped really to knock over. Or outside of that, had a fantastic game. 2 late frees, I suppose, that he would normally have slotted went awry. But I think on the balance of it, though, Matt, Cork were probably the stronger outfit over the 65 odd minutes that was played in Páirc Uí Chaoimh last night. They created numerous goal chances, and I think both for some last gasp and ditch defending and for a glaring miss, it has to be said, by one of the Cork forwards when he seemed to have the entire goal at his mercy. In truth, Cork were probably a bit more than 2 points better than Limerick last night.
Yeah, I suppose if they were. There isn't any doubt at all about that. And at the very end there, we nearly nicked it. We had that goal chance at the finish, and it would have been would have been daylight robbery had we done it. I
thought there was another puck out in it as well, Matt. I know there was a Cork player went down injured in the last few minutes there, and he seemed to take at least a minute off the clock. And we only got 30 seconds of the over the 66, which I would have thought that there was definitely another puck out in it for me.
Yeah, and the referee in those cases has latitude, because if you notice that when the announcement is made, and it says there will be at least 2, 4, 6 or whatever minutes there were. So that gives the referee latitude that if shenanigans and gamesmanship goes on during those 6 minutes to add it on. No, He played 20 seconds over the 6 minutes, which was it certainly didn't it certainly didn't cover for the amount of time that was lost during the 6 minutes. And you just wonder, had Limerick got another opportunity to attack, what they would have come up with. But one way or the other, Raf, it would have been robbery. But there is full credit to Limerick, because this is a Cork team that the vast majority of them are up on the age. There was 9 of the Limerick team that I know, plus Patrick Kirby, who came on, 10, that are eligible for under 20 again next year. So it was a very, very, very young Limerick team, and full credit to them. And the real credit, Raf, is at one stage in the second half, now they were under the cosh, no doubt at all about it, in the third quarter. Cork got some fine scores, particularly Dara Flynn from Ballygiblin. Like he got 5 points from play. In that third quarter, he got 4 from play, and they were crucial. It won him the man of the match. But at no stage did it look that Limerick's heads were going to drop. They were down 6 points, and the odds seemed to be stacked against them, but they kept plugging away. And there's an object lesson in it for any team that was looking on. You hang in there, you keep in there, and had they got the goal at the finish, the JJ Kennelly Cup would be in our Patrick.
Yeah, absolutely. And look, again, it wasn't to be, but definitely some huge positives from those 2 matches. Moving on to Camogie, Matt, and not a great weekend for the seniors last weekend, bowing out of the championship. I know they have a game this weekend, which we'll preview after we talk about this, but Tipperary 221, Limerick 111, and very hard to assess the kind of the season again for Limerick Camogie. Progress made, but again, with you could see, Limerick Camogie has made progress, but so too have a lot of the teams around them, and it's that we still have a bit of a gap to close.
We still have a bit of a gap to close, and like the target for like, let's face it, up to about 12 months ago, 2 years ago, you've Kilkenny, Galway, and Cork on a different level from the rest. And the question was, who would make it into a top 4? I think we've got that answer, and that answer is Tipperary. And it's not because that they beat Limerick now last week, but all the signs are that there is a strong revival in Camogie, in Tipperary. And like, we ran Kilkenny very close in the quarterfinal of the league. They ran them closer. And they have been hovering around there in the last 4 for the last 2 or 3 years. Pressed Kilkenny very hard in the All-Ireland semi-final last year. So there was no doubt about how formidable the trip to Tip was going to be. But like, certainly the gods conspired against Limerick to a certain degree in the Camogie Championship. Now, they were drawn in a group where you had Tipperary, Wexford, and Offaly. And on form, and on the type of form that Limerick showed in the league and showed in the Munster Championship, if notwithstanding that display against Cork in the final, you would have expected that Limerick would have got out of the group. They had a decent shot at getting out of the group. But of course, it all went horribly wrong. It's not last Sunday it went horribly wrong, Raf. It was the previous Saturday it went horribly wrong. When Pat Ryan was forced and faced with the dilemma of going into the game in Newcastle West against Wexford without 4 of his players. Now, another thing, even before a ball was poked, like, the gods conspired against us as well, because we had our first game at home and our remaining 2 games away. You know, that is a difficult hand to be dealt, and I cannot understand it for the life of me, why something cannot be done about that. If you have 1 home game, at least have it in the middle, you know, rather than be finished with your home business on the first day. But getting back to that particular Wexford game, faced with the loss of 4 players, And the performance that those that went in put on, only to have it taken away from them with the last puck of the game, a penalty. And the referee blew the whistle from the puck out. Absolute heartbreak. And now they're out of the championship. Now they're in a situation where they have to either draw or beat Offaly to avoid being embroiled in a relegation scrap, in a survival scrap. And when it goes into survival scraps, anything can happen. It's dog eat dog. I'm telling you, it is very, very difficult place to be, and you would hope that this situation will not arise for Limerick.
It just goes to show, Matt, as well, the fine margins in sport, in that you can go from that penalty incident or that scored penalty a couple of weeks ago. If that doesn't happen, then not only are we basically assured of our place at the senior championship next year, but we also would probably have a shot at qualifying for the knockout stages going into the final round. But that one incident has now turned it on its head, and we're staring down a very different barrel altogether. But again, just goes to show the fine margins, and it would be a travesty if Limerick were to go down this year, considering the progress that they've made, and I suppose the fact that it's Pat Ryan's first term or first year at the helm, and you would love to see him get another crack at this level. And to be honest with you, I'm full sure that they should have enough to do what they need to do against Offaly the weekend.
You would hope so, but when you're talking about fine margins, this is the finest of fine margins. Literally a puck of a ball that we're going to Offaly now on Saturday to Banagher at 2:00. In a battle to avoid being involved in relegation, rather than being going there in a battle for a quarter-final place at least. That is how fine the margin is. Like one puck of a ball. And that is why I said certainly Lady Luck hasn't shone on Limerick during the championship. And it was a championship despite the heavy defeat by Cork that Limerick were entitled to come in with a certain amount of confidence. Like they beat Clare in the first round of the league, and it was a real challenge when they were facing Clare again in the Munster Championship. But they beat Clare in the Munster Championship and then went down to Walsh Park and beat Waterford. And we see where Waterford are now. Waterford are through to the knockout stages already. So, it's so hard to call, and it's all about breaks and that bit of luck. Now, in the Munster final, no doubt Limerick really did not show up on the day, and Cork were excellent. But I was quite happy for everything except the last 10 seconds in Newcastle West. That they had got over that in the championship game against Wexford, and that the season was back on track until that bloody late penalty upscuttled everything. So look, it's going to be a difficult task. Offaly any day are very, very difficult. Offaly on their own patch are even more difficult. But I think we have the wherewithal. I honestly believe that if we can bring anything like near our A game on Saturday, that we will be okay.
The junior Camogie side, Matt, a good win over Cavan at the weekend.
Yeah, they had a very good win. I was out at it. You must remember, first of all, Cavan, they won Division 4. They were impressive winners of Division 4 of the league. It was Cavan's first. It was Cavan's first game. Now, but before a ball was poked in Bruff last Sunday, Raf, the whole dynamic of the league, of the group, had changed. In that originally Limerick were down to play down Antrim and Cavan, and Antrim withdrew and gave a walkover. So it became a 3-team group, 3-county group with 2 to qualify. But that wasn't the only sting in the tail. Limerick were due to be at home to both Cavan and Down, and away to Antrim. And when Antrim withdrew, the powers that be in their wisdom decided that Limerick should travel to Down. So I don't know how you reconcile that one. I thought a draw was a draw at the start of the year, and I thought if somebody withdrew, that, you know, whatever benefit would accrue from it would accrue. But obviously it didn't. Limerick still have to take the long trip to Park Esler in Newry next Saturday evening for a game at 7:30. But the win over Cavan virtually assures that Limerick will be in the knockout stages. A draw or a win against Down, they're absolutely definitely in the knockout stages. But certainly the win, I think, and the margin, 7 points, I think it's good enough that Limerick will make the knockout stages. Now, the Limerick performance against Cavan was mixed. I thought Cavan had a few exceptionally good Camogie players. You must remember that the level and the stage and the phase of development of the game in Cavan is a long way behind Limerick. And I thought at stages they had some very good players, but I thought Limerick put some very, very good patches of play together, impressive patches of play. Now, Limerick got 2 excellent goals. All in the space of a minute, one from Ida Cunningham and one from Valerie Shanahan. Now, it was Ida Cunningham's first game of the year, and she got a goal in each half. She got 2 goals. She's a very, 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 she's a fine full forward now. She's a big girl that's able to play Camogie, and she's a very, very good target woman. But Limerick put very good passages of play together, and other passages that weren't so good. Raf, we've been saying it all the time. Michelle Curtin is a huge loss to this Limerick team, and she's going to have to sit out the Down game again. And hopefully after that she will be back for the quarter-final or semi-final, because were Limerick to beat Down, they're in with a shout of going directly to the semi-final. But at least I think they're through to the quarter-final. But I was happy with Limerick's performance, because there were some quite talented players on the Cavan side, but not enough of them from a Cavan point of view.
Yeah, probably not, I suppose, Matt, when you look at it that way. So yeah, look, let's hope that the juniors can get the business done and at least prolong the Camogie season for a while for them. Anyway, the ladies football, Matt, also in action last weekend, and not a great weekend for them. And they're just not clicking in the championship this year. I've seen a few of their matches, and I suppose that what you could really say would sum them up as hot and cold and inconsistent. Great in patches, but when they're poor, it tends to cost them.
I agree with you. I've seen the 3. I've looked back at the 3 games. I was very, very disappointed with the Antrim game, I have to say. It was disappointing. I'll tell you the aspect of it that was disappointing was that we were down 8 points at half time. Within 5 minutes of the restart of the second half, we had the margin down to 3. It was very manageable, and it looked as if the impetus and the momentum was with Limerick, and like they had the cue to drive on. And it just didn't happen, Raf. It just didn't happen. They only got 2 points more for the rest of the game, I think, which was a paltry return. Now, Antrim, in fairness to them, they had the ability to create goals, and of course, as we know in the past, there isn't much use in having the ability to create goals if you can't take them. But they were able to match their approach play with good finishes, and they took their goals quite well. But the upshot of it all, Raf, is that it leaves Limerick's hopes of qualifying for the semi-final in a very precarious position. Now, they have 1 game left. You must remember, this is a 5-county championship with 4 teams to qualify. And there is the dreadful, unthinkable possibility that we might be the county that would miss out. The way things are at the moment. Now we have that vital win over Derry under our belts, and Derry have to play Carlow. Now Carlow are pointless as we speak, but Carlow are the team that we play in the final round. We also play them in the final round of the league. And we saw the stubborn resistance they put up at the Gaelic grounds before Limerick got over the line. So it's anything but a gimme playing Carlow in the last game of the year of the group phase, where Limerick just have to get something out of the game, or they face the possibility of not qualifying. So it's on the 15th of August. It's a huge game for Donald Ryan and his Chargers.
Just looking at the table there, Matt, as you can see, Antrim on plus 25, Wicklow on plus 15, both with 6 points. Then Derry on 3 points with plus 2. Limerick scoring difference not great, Matt, either. They're minus 18. Carlow's obviously minus 24 and not having won a match. But I suppose we would be kind of half hoping that Derry would beat Carlow and kind of, at least have it going into the final round, knowing that, a draw against Carlow would do, or even if we were to lose and lose within the points difference to qualify, in the top 4. So I'd assume that we would be all hoping for a Derry win this weekend to give us, I suppose, more options to qualify in the final round.
Yeah, that's one way of looking at it. Another way I would look at it, Raf, is that I hope that Carlow would win this weekend, and Derry still have Wicklow to play. So if were Derry to lose their last 2 games and Limerick lose to Carlow, Limerick would have the head-to-head on Derry.
Oh, it goes to head then, does it? So
yeah.
If teams are level in points, scoring difference doesn't count. It goes to head. It only goes to
I need to check that, but I'm pretty sure that's it. But if you go by what you're saying, we certainly want Derry to win.
Yeah.
If tis on points difference, we'd want not only Derry to win, but win by a substantial margin.
Yeah. I suppose.
Carlow and Derry have a game in hand on Limerick.
Yeah. Look, they do. They will need to. They will need to do something that they haven't been doing all year, and that is, I suppose, to hit a vein or a consistent 60-minute performance. Because what I've seen of them this year across league and championship is they can be outstanding for 10 to 15 minutes, but when they drop off, they seem to get punished quite severely. And they, the trend has been that when they have dropped off, they've given themselves mountains to climb in games. And I suppose, look, in like any sports, you can't really afford to give yourself those kind of obstacles to overcome, because you won't do it all the time. It's very hard to, and I think that's kind of, Donald Ryan again we've seen progress in them this year, but just in games they have dropped off, and it has been costly. But look, still in with a fighting chance, and I suppose that's all you can ask for in championship going into the last weekend.
That's all. But what I would think at the moment, if I could express it this way, is that the sum of the parts is greater than the sum of the team. Because there are some fine individual players on the side now. And there are a couple of very, very, very good forwards on the side, but it just doesn't, for some reason, seem to be gelling. And you're right in your analysis there. It doesn't seem to be gelling for long enough in any particular game. Like, you can get a spectacular 10 minutes, like what we got the 5 minutes after half time and got a couple of goals. And like we had the same, if you recall, against Offaly. In the league semi-final, and Offaly are an intermediate team, and like we got that spell, got those goals, rocked the system, as it were.
Same against Wicklow. I think we got a goal against Wicklow as well that put us up a couple of points, and it little by little we kind of flittered that lead away again, and it's been. I'd imagine that if that the overarching feeling would be of frustration, in that you can see the potential is there for 5 minutes or 10 minutes and then it switches off again. And I think, that's a killer for coaches when they know that it is within the squad, but they just don't see it for long enough. But again, like we said, still have a fighting chance, and we hope going into the final weekend that they can do what they need to do. Matt, plenty of action in the All-Ireland Senior Hurling Championship last weekend, and again this weekend with the final round of the qualifiers as we head into quarter-final weekend. And Galway getting really, really upset by a Waterford team that just seemed to come out all guns blazing. But regardless of that, I think Galway were extremely, extremely flat on the day, and that's two really below par, tepid championship performances that Galway have turned in this year against Galway and against Waterford. And when you picture the Galway team that gave Limerick a right good rattle, albeit in a league game up in Salt Hill earlier this year, they looked poles apart. Now, I know you can't draw too many comparisons between league and championship, but you'd imagine if they brought 3/4 of the intensity that they had in that league, that wet day up in Salt Hill, to Croke Park last weekend, that they'd have finished a lot, or last weekend, that they'd have finished a lot closer to in Semple Stadium, that they'd have finished a lot closer to Waterford than they did.
Yeah, I'm not an apologist for Galway or anything like that, but I'm subject to correction on this, but I'm pretty sure of it. Waterford and Galway have met 12 times in the championship, and Waterford have now won 11. The exception being the 2017 All-Ireland, which was the biggest meeting between them.
I'm sure Waterford would have swapped that one for the other 11 if they had their time again.
I think they possibly would, but the record is like that. I can't, except with the exception of 2017 in my memory, and the meetings of Galway and Waterford were novel enough now in the Munster or in the championship down through the years, because first of all, Galway weren't in Leinster; they were coming in the semi-final, and you must remember that Waterford went, was it from 1963 to 2003 without winning a Munster championship, so they weren't getting near Galway, but they certainly have the upper hand in them. And if you recall, Raf, 2 years ago, the 2019 league semi-finals were played in Nolan Park, and Dublin pushed us very, very hard, and everybody was expecting that Waterford or that Galway would glide past Waterford in the second semi-final. And lo and behold, Waterford stopped them. They're some kind of a bogey team with Galway, but look, certainly Galway went off the boil. There's no doubt at all about that. It was a shock, their performance against Dublin, and I certainly, if they were mindful of tradition, I think they would have been very, very worried facing Waterford in the qualifiers because of their record against them. But it isn't what we expected from Galway. It isn't what we saw from Galway in the league game in Salt Hill. And above all, Raf, it was a million miles away from what we saw from Galway in the All-Ireland semi-final last year. And
does that put Shane O'Neill in a tough position in Galway?
But
not saying it's Shane O'Neill's fault, or not blaming a coach, but if a team goes out there and you see that they've given it all and kind of died with their boots on, then it's a bit more acceptable. But to turn in the performance that they did against Dublin, which was just, it was an abomination. It was as bad a performance from a Galway team. And I mean, Dublin, are a decent side, but you would go no more than that. Like, I mean, I don't think they're world beaters by any stretch of the imagination. They're the longest priced team left in the championship. I mean, God, like if somebody told you that Galway would have flopped that badly against Dublin in the opening round of the championship, you wouldn't have believed them. But I suppose when you see a performance like that, you're looking for a response, and then to go out the next weekend and be almost as flat. Now, I know they did run it closer in the end, but I think the scoreline didn't reflect the dominance of the Waterford performance for the bulk of that match. And again, two really kind of head-scratching performances that, if you're a coach, you're kind of looking at them and saying, well, geez, how am I going to get the most out of these guys,
Yeah, I'm sometimes wondering when it comes to Galway, is the expectation of the Galway senior team greater than it should be? And why I say that is because they've had such a string of success at minor level, to a lesser degree at under 21 level. But for some reason, Galway have not been able to make the transition from the underage right up to senior, not in the manner in which, for instance, John Kiley did it with his under 21 side. It was in 2015, and Pat Donnelly then came in 2017 and put another one, and he got a right cracking team out of it. I was watching Galway. I watched them in the Leinster final this year, in the 2021 under 20 final the other night, and like they were lucky to get by what I thought was an average Dublin team, and that sent out a certain amount of alarm bells for me in that, like they're after winning 4 minors in a row, Raf. That should give them a pool of players second to none that would be available for under 20. It looks to me, and of course,
Matt,
you must remember,
Matt, under the current current structure of the minor hurling championship, does it really tell you a lot when they're coming in winning one-off games? Or I'm not saying the talent isn't there. I'm not saying they don't deserve, or they're not deserving of them. But give me the round robin in Munster or Leinster, where a coach or an underage coach or a minor coach will learn a hell of a lot more. Now, I know under the shortened seasons with COVID, it's gone back to the very traditional win or bust kind of routine or format. But, it's very hard. And we've seen Galway win all these minor All-Irelands, but you're looking at them winning them on the back of playing maybe 1 or 2 games. And you're saying to yourself, well, geez, there's a Limerick team going in there having played 4 round robin games. Same with a Leinster team. I think I'd far prefer to be in Limerick's position and getting the mileage or getting the experience on these minor players than what Galway are doing. And I suppose the lack of transition from that minor success to senior would probably bear that out.
Yeah, to a certain point, I agree with you. But having said that, it certainly is not Galway's fault that the system is as it is, because they have been seeking to go into Leinster for a number of years now. But obviously there are interests in Leinster that don't want them near the place. Now, it's very, very hard to reconcile why Galway senior hurlers and Galway under 20 hurlers are good enough to go into Leinster, and why prevent their minors from going into Leinster. Like, can anybody give me a cogent reason for that?
Well, I think it's just the fact that they preferred being a closed shop rather than seeing Galway's name on the honour roll in the Leinster Championship at the minor grade. But I mean, if it's there, like you said, in 20s and seniors, then I think the logical thing would be to have it there for the minor grade as well. But again, logic doesn't always win out.
Yeah, but your point is right in that they come in. That there was a time in the minor championship pre the round robin. Now I'm going back maybe 20 maybe 25 years, maybe even less, actually, up to 15 years ago, where you had young lads when minor was under 18, where they were juggling doing the leaving certificate with playing with their county in the provincial championships. And Galway was sitting pretty over in the west with concentrating on their exams. When the exams were over, they were free to go and prepare for 1 or 2 games, as you say, to win an All-Ireland. But, in fairness to Galway, they don't want that situation. They don't want the present situation to continue. But because it's probably militating against them.
Yeah, it is absolutely. They learn far less in 2 games than the other counties will learn in 4. It does not make sense, regardless whether they win it or not. I suppose you can see. And look, you go back to the Galway senior team. You go back to their win in 2017, to running Limerick so close in 2018. Had that Joe Canning free dropped over the bar, had we had extra time, had somebody pulled in it before Tom Condon snapped it, we could be having a very different conversation here entirely. And I mean, even go back to, I know 2019 was a disaster for them, failing to get out of the round robin in Leinster. But you look at last year, last year and running Limerick, very close again in a semi-final, and everybody was saying kind of coming in this year that Galway would be the team who would have the physicality to live with Limerick, who would have the forwards to punish Limerick, and we saw little bits of that in that league match up in Salt Hill. But again, it just has fallen so flat for them. It's you'd really wonder where they go from here.
Yeah, irrespective of who wins the championship, and that there are 6 left in it now at this stage, and we hope that Limerick will be the ones that win it. You're right, the story of the championship will be how far Galway have regressed and the disappointment of Galway. And it is simplistic. Simplistic, and people run for this to hide behind this reason. It is very, very simplistic to blame the manager or blame management. I think in situations like that, which Galway find themselves, and other counties, of course, find themselves as well, it needs a long, hard, honest look with all the stakeholders. And I'm talking about county board, I'm talking about players and the management. But to isolate the management and say, oh, that's the management, they got this wrong, they got that wrong, they got the next thing wrong. No management go out to lose a game. No. So I don't buy into the thing that it is the manager, but certainly it certainly poses a serious problem for Shane O'Neill. He will be scratching his head to know where it has gone wrong, but it has gone very wrong in the last since last year's All-Ireland semi-final. Now, they had a huge win against Westmeath in the first round, and people maybe have got slightly carried away with that. And then when they beat Limerick, inflicted the first defeat on Limerick since 2019, everybody said, oh, Galway the team. And then, of course, they had a very, very good win in the league down in Cork. Now, they lost to Tipperary in the league. And was it a draw with Waterford? I think no, they lost to Waterford as well. Yeah, that would be par for the course, losing to Waterford in Galway land. But and look, it's very, very disappointing because Galway have some excellent hurlers. They play an exciting brand of hurling, I think. And of course, like, it leads us in nicely to the week that Galway have had and the departure of Joe Canning from the inter-county stage, Raf. Like Joe Canning, he's just not a loss to Galway. Joe Canning is a loss to the game of hurling. Like one of the greatest of all time. One of the greatest of all time, Joe Canning. He's not the leading championship scorer of all time for nothing. And like, the absolute joy that he brought to so many for so long, not just in his own county of Galway, but in all counties, who really enjoy the finer points and the finer skills of hurling. And plus that, Raf, off the field, an absolute role model. And you could see how many times after games in Thurles or Limerick or Pearse Stadium or even in Croke Park, if the crowd were allowed in Croach, very, very few would be. He'd let last a very few coming off the field. He had time for so many people. A great role model for the game. A fantastic hurler. A huge loss to the game. Huge loss to Galway, and all we can say is thanks, Joe, for the memories. They're very, very good ones.
If you had to pick a score, Matt, would it be that goal against, I think, was it the catch and turn against Kilkenny, or what score would you pick?
But you'd be spoiled for choice. that was a very, very special score. But like we needn't even go back that far. The succession of line balls that he put over against Limerick last year, you know, there are so many great scores there. That, you know, too numerous altogether. Some very, very special scores. Like what we're seeing the departure of a very, very, very special player. A once in a generation player.
Absolutely. Matt, speaking of once in a generation player, Clare had one playing for them last weekend against Cork and Tony Kelly, but despite his heroics, just came short against Cork. This was a very, very hotly contested match inside in the Gaelic grounds, aside from the soaring temperatures. But Cork, I suppose, just getting the business done and doing enough to get over the line. But Clare certainly gave him a good rattle. And I suppose, look, if you look at, you know, contrast the you know, we talk about managers, and contrast the Galway camp on the back of the defeat against Waterford, and contrast the Clare camp on the back of that defeat against Cork. I put it to you that the Clare camp would be in far, you know, obviously gutted at going out of the championship, but I think Clare can definitely hold their heads up high in what Brian Lohan has done this year with that panel, despite, I suppose, some of the stuff going on in the background in the county. He certainly has seemed to got a tune out of this Clare team.
He certainly has, and if you go back, is it only about 2 months since the league started, and that what for Clare was that defeat against Antrim in the opening round of the league in Belfast, like that was a low point for Clare, and in many people looking in from the outside, having read and heard about the different goings on that were going on in Clare over the winter months, or to say, oh right, this is it now. It's spreading onto the field. But Brian Lohan rose above all that, and that is great. That absolutely great credit due to him. The way that he revived that Clare team, the way that he got the victory over Waterford, and like if there's a standout moment for me with Brian Lohan in 2021, it was the dignity with which he conducted the interview immediately after the Tipperary game. When Clare were on the wrong end of two very dubious referees' decision that would have changed the whole course of the championship. Because let's face it, there was that penalty that was given, but inexplicably altogether, and I believe this was the more difficult decision, the penalty that wasn't given to Clare. But the dignity in which that man, in those circumstances, carried out the interview, I think it speaks volumes for him. Obviously, very, very disappointed to have lost to Cork in the circumstances. Like it was a save by Patrick Collins in the last minute that prevented Clare from getting through, and of course it was their second week out and running, and second week out in the championship, and in the type of weather that we had, was certainly very, very energy sapping. And you're right about Tony Kelly, and an exceptional player, and even by his standards, probably wouldn't have reached the standard that he would have hoped to reach against Cork. But what a performance, nevertheless. The mood in the Clare camp, in contrast with the mood in the Galway camp, I think there'll be no comparison. I think Clare have jolly good reason to be happy. With a season that started off so poorly in Belfast, promised so little, and delivered a decent season. They turned it around and delivered a decent season, and they can certainly say, for the years to come, what if after that semi-final with Tipperary?
They certainly can, but Matt, what ifs don't count for much as we look into the games this weekend and quarterfinal action, of course. Both games on Saturday. Tipperary versus Waterford from Páirc Uí Chaoimh at 1:30, And at 7 o'clock, it's Dublin versus Cork at Semple Stadium in the other quarter-final. Matt, two very close encounters, I think, is what we'll see here. The first one for me is going to be the harder one to call. Arrested Tip, looking for a performance after the collapse against Limerick. A Waterford with momentum. That promises to be an intriguing affair.
Yeah. Rested bodies, certainly in Tipperary. Whether they'll be healed minds or not is another thing, because it psychologically it was a terrible, terrible blow to Tipperary, the circumstances in which they lost the Munster final. Like Liam Sheedy must be scratching his head out, and his management team wondering which Tipperary is going to turn up. Is it the Tipperary of the first half or the Tipperary of the second half, or are we going to have a repeat of one half and a very high and another half very low? I think it's going to be difficult for Tipperary to pick it up. On the face of it, like the Aces would seem to be in Waterford's hands at the moment. Like they've got that win over Galway, and even though like they struggled for a long time to put away Laois, you must remember. And you just wondered how much of it is this bogey team over Galway. I think Tipperary will regroup. Certainly the conditions, they certainly will not be as humid. And we've spoken in this medium a number of times about the elder statesmen, let's say, on the Tipperary team. And this might suit him for one last hurrah. I think it'll be a very, very close game, but I think Tipperary are capable of recovering and possibly winning it, Raf.
Yeah, as you know, I do some work with the Tipperary Supporters Club, and there was I think Owen Kelly and Brendan Cummins on a pod there during the week, and they were both kind of thinking Tipperary by a nose, if you will. None of them sticking exactly their necks out on it, but just that feeling that there's still another kick in Tipperary, and that they won't want their performance in the Munster final to be to be what they're remembered for this year. And I think we'll see a kick in them. And I think that what we've seen over Waterford on over the last few weeks, that we're really going to get a measure as to where Waterford are. I think Tipperary are going to tell us where Waterford are, and Waterford are going to tell us where Tipperary are mentally as well, going into the semi-final. So I think it's an intriguing battle that we're with so many, there's things on both sides that would really kind of have you dying to tune into this one. The other game, Matt, Dublin and Cork, surely that's Cork's to win up in Semple Stadium. Hard to see Dublin overturning them. I know, Dublin's performances this year, springing a surprise against Galway, falling short against Kilkenny, albeit with a COVID hit panel in prior to that game. Hard to see past Cork. They do have that bit of momentum now. The win over Clare, all of a sudden there's a buzz around Cork hurling at the moment with the minors and 20s, and I just have a sneaky feeling that Cork will do enough to beat Dublin.
Yeah, on the face of it, you would say yes. You would say yes, and like you would be inclined to revise Dublin's performance against Galway when you see how tamely Galway went out of the championship subsequently to Waterford. It takes a bit of a loss out of it, but I don't think it's as cut and dry as that now. We spoke a while ago about the great tradition that Waterford have over Galway. Cork equally have a great tradition over Dublin. It's 94 years, going all the way back to 1927, since Dublin beat Cork in the championship. They beat them in the 27 All Ireland. They haven't beaten them since now, and Cork won 4 All Irelands in a row in the 1940s, 41 to 44, and in 3 of the finals they beat Dublin. So they really are a bogey team. Now they played in the group stages last year in Thurles, and it ended 125 to 22 points. And Dublin were right in it. I think Dublin are going to make it difficult for Cork, Raf. If Dublin can prevent Cork creating and scoring the goals, they're going to make it difficult. Now, you're right, they were missing 4 players that probably would have been starting against Kilkenny. Plus the fact that they lost Owen O'Donnell early in the game. And he's one of the finest fullbacks in the country, and he apparently is going to be back for the weekend, which will be crucial. I think Cork will sneak it, but it could be very, very, very close. It could be after a battle. I think Dublin are capable. Like, Dublin can come up with this performance out of nowhere. Up there or down on the ground, like they did when they got caught by Laois. Was it last year or the year before? There seems to be no in between, or very few in between. But I think Dublin will push Cork pretty hard. But I think Cork will have the wherewithal to get over the line. But it's anything but a gimme, and I think Cork will be approaching it that way. They will be taking absolutely nothing for granted, Raf.
No, you can be sure of that. Matt, just looking at some of the permutations for the weekend and what it might or might not mean for Limerick. Dublin and Tip wins would mean Limerick versus Dublin and Kilkenny versus Tip. Cork and Waterford wins would mean Limerick versus Waterford and Kilkenny versus Cork. Cork and Tip wins would see Limerick v Cork, Kilkenny v Tip. And then if Dublin and Waterford were to win, it would be Limerick versus Dublin, Kilkenny versus Waterford. Matt, what would your preferred option be there? I have a funny feeling that it would be either the top one or the bottom one.
Would you believe I have no preferred option? We're in the last 4, and when you're in the last 4, all you can think about is beating what's going to be put in front of you. And I'm pretty confident that what I've seen from Limerick in the second half against Tipperary, not in the first half, but what I've seen over in this Limerick team over the last couple of years, that I don't fear anybody in the semi-final. I don't have a preference.
Yeah, and I suppose, look, we've had chats with Sean Finn and with Garrod Hegarty during the week, Matt, as well, and all seem very relaxed and very much kind of, taking it in their stride. And I suppose, look, that comes with the experience of 2018. It comes with the experience of last year. And getting over the line, getting over that final hurdle the first time, you can see, even as a very young panel yet. I mean, you look at Sean Finn, like, this guy has a lot of hurling left in him, and he just comes across now, despite the fact that he disagreed with you twice in the interview the last day, Matt, which I thought was atrociously cheeky, Matt. But he had the temerity to disagree with you in an interview.
Yeah, well, but Sean knows how I feel about him. Like, Sean is an absolutely fantastic player and a fantastic guy, And like, just look at his record. Forget about the 3 All-Stars, like two Munster and 2 All-Ireland under 21 medals, 2 Munster, 2 All-Ireland, 3 Munster and 2 All-Ireland senior medals so far, 2 National League medals, 2 Munster minor medals. Can't argue with this guy, If he disagrees with you, he has good grounds for it. Yeah, but look, I have but Sean Finn, you take Sean Finn. There are a number of players like Sean Finn in that position on that Limerick team. Like, they've medals and top medals coming out their ears, and with that top medals comes vast experience, a huge reservoir of experience, plus the fact that apart from the second half against Tipperary, I don't think we have seen the best of Limerick this year.
Yeah, probably not. And again, look, you just think that there's always gears in this Limerick team that they can go through, and we'll be hoping and watching the weekend's action in the hope of knowing our fate, I suppose, for the semi-final. And we've another week to look forward to that. Matt, I believe that there was the culmination of some football league action in the county over the week. If we want to just run through that before we wrap up the podcast.
Yeah, first of all, congratulations to Mona Lean, Atay, and Ballybrick and Bohermore, who won leagues during the week, won county leagues, and you say county leagues, and like Jack and I were talking about it last week, about the success that these county leagues have been, and it was a leap of faith on the part of the county board to put such a program together. It was a condensed program. It was an ambitious program, but they carried it off. And we had the senior final the other night between Monaleen and Newcastle West. I was out at it in McNeville Park, and Newcastle West would have gone into it favourites. Both teams had come through their respective groups unbeaten. Newcastle West had got a walkover in the semi-final from Ballylanders, who had won the South. And but Monaleen beat Father Casey's in the semi-final. Now they beat Newcastle West in the final, and it was a new look Monaleen team, a young Monaleen team, well tutored by Maurice Gavin and his backroom team, and will certainly, the ball hasn't been kicked in the championship yet, but they certainly will be contenders for it from what I saw the other night. Now, Donald O'Sullivan didn't play because he's nursing an injury. Brian Donovan came on in the second half, and he showed when he came on why he is a county player. Got a couple of points in a low-scoring game, so had a big hand in the goal. Now, Cian Sheehan was missing for Newcastle West, who was a big loss, but it a slight worry there for Jimmy Lee and his management team in Newcastle West, in that they only got 1 point in the second half, in the entire second half, and that was from a free. And they got 1 point in the entire game from play. So now it would appear to me, looking in from the outside, and I have no reason to believe this, but other than what I saw, is that I thought Monaleen were further down the road in terms of preparation than Newcastle West. So I think that Newcastle West will be in a position to close the gap when you know, come the championship. Now we had the intermediate final as well. Now the intermediate final, it went to extra time. It was a repeat of the West final between Atay and Monagea, and Atay won it in extra time. Now they like I was saying there a while ago about Monaleen springing Brian Donovan from the bench. Now they sprung a veteran in Gerard Hearn, and he was hugely influential. He got a goal and 2 points at a crucial stage. Now, of course, we should say that the leagues were running as leagues on divisional basis, and when it came to the final, they became the championship final of the division, and they reverted back then to be county leagues for the county semi-final and final. Now that might sound strange, but I honestly thought it was a good template, because it involved the divisions. They had the divisional finals, and there were some cracking divisional finals in West Limerick. There was 1 or 2 of them in the south as well. The third team that were successful during the week, of course, were Ballybrick and Bohermore. They defeated Fianna Kilmeedy in the Junior A League final, which was a landmark victory for them as well, because Fianna are back in the football championship this year, and they've succeeded. A number of their players, as you know, who used to play with from Bradford, the Gormans, Brian Hannigan, Daniel Gare, and those, they've all returned now to Fianna, and they're fielding their own team, and they came within a couple of points. It was 1-8 to 1-6, but Ballybrick and Bohermore won it. But congratulations to the 3 clubs it was a competition that the clubs simply bought into, Raf. They simply bought into it. Now, we can scratch our heads and say, why did they buy into it? And say, did they buy into it because there was such a shortage of action for so long that they were mad to get back out on the field again, or what? But certainly, hats off to the county board. It was a good idea, a good template. It was carried out very, 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 very well. And I think it's something that they should look at to become a permanent fixture on the calendar.
Absolutely, Matt. And yeah, like you said, hats off to the county board for organising such a well-run league, considering the restrictions and considering all the obstacles in their way. Matt, I suppose that's where we'll wrap it up for this week's podcast. We'll be back hopefully next week as we look forward to All-Ireland semi-final weekend, and you never know, we might even have the ball Jack Neville back in on presenting the pod. So until then, we will say goodbye.
Cheers.
The impression again we get out of it, what you put into it's like a walk of life. If you're good enough, go out and get it, no more about it.
Not so much control in the centre of the field from Kilkenny as Richie Bennett sends it high and over the bar.
Your mother sends you down to the shop for a pound's worth of goods and she gives you 50 pence. You can't get the pound's worth of goods, can you?
Just about kept in. Oh, well done, Johnny Buckley. To do that to Tommaso Shea, he deserves to score from here. One of the highlights of the Sunday game.
Limerick went out there from the workout today. No more about it. They made all the running, that was it. Put the ball over the bar and the back of it, and that's it. No ifs, no buts.
Is there much time left? We have a couple of injuries. Here comes Kieran Carey. Carey leading the charge of the right brigade. 45 metres out. He's a chance to score. He's put it hard. He's put it over.
There's no sympathy in this game for anybody.